The air on the Galactic Orphanage and Cultural Exchange Station Harmony always smelled like too many things. It was a mix of sweet oils, clean fur, damp soil, and the sharp smell of the air cleaners working hard. The station was a place of soft lights and round edges. It was built to be peaceful. Its halls were filled with the young of many species, all learning about the great galaxy together. It was a living promise of peace. Into this careful peace came two problems. The first problem was a girl. Her name was Jiho. She was found alone in a small human sleep pod, drifting in empty space. The pod was all that was left of a colony ship called the Morning Star. The ship had been torn apart by a gravity storm. Jiho was the only survivor. She was small, with dark hair and quiet eyes. To the beings of the galactic consensus, she was a living puzzle. She came from Earth, a Class 12 Deathworld, a place of extreme gravity, violent weather, and fierce animals. Her bones were too dense. Her muscles were too efficient. She could eat foods that would make others sick. She was a creature from a nightmare world, now sitting very still in a bright playroom. The caretakers, beings with soft fur or gentle scales, looked at her with nervous eyes. They saw a monster from stories. They called her the Deathworlder, but never to her face. They spoke in kind, quiet voices around her. The second problem was a boy. His name was Taejun. He was of the Kfor species. His people were warriors. They came from a world of harsh mountains and great plains. They were hunters, a predator species. Their society was built on strict rules of honor and strength. The Kfor were respected and deeply feared across the galaxy. Sending a child to the Harmony was a political move. It was meant to show the Kfor were committed to peace. But no one felt peaceful about it. Taejun had dark, golden eyes that missed nothing. He had a quiet way of moving, smooth and balanced. Where Jiho made others nervous, Taejun made them afraid. His very presence made the other younglings go quiet. Their instincts told them a hunter was near. The head of the orphanage, a tall being named Director Lunar, decided on a strategy. "We will place them together," he said, his long fingers tapping a screen. "In Pod 7. It is the most observed room. If the human's Deathworld nature provokes the Kfor, or the Kfor's predatory instinct targets the human, we will see it. We can manage it." It was a cold logic. So, Jiho and Taejun were led to the same learning pod. Pod 7 was a wide room with a clear dome looking out at the stars. There were low tables, soft sitting mats, and shelves of learning tablets. Other younglings were already there. A fuzzy Talaxian child, two slender Silneth with large eyes, and a small, rock-like Grummel. When Taejun entered, a wave of tension filled the room. The Talaxian froze. The Silneth moved closer together. Everyone felt it. The predator was here. Taejun ignored them. He walked to an empty mat near the viewing dome and sat. He looked out at the stars, his face still. A moment later, a caretaker led Jiho in. She stood by the door, her small human hands holding the straps of a simple bag. Her eyes scanned the room. She saw the fearful younglings. She saw the adults watching her with careful faces. She saw the back of Taejun's head. She did not look afraid. She looked tired. She walked to a mat in the corner, far from everyone, and sat down. She took out a small, wrinkled paper from her bag. Inside was a last rice cake from her old life. She held it but did not eat. The day's activity was cultural sharing. The younglings were supposed to show something from their home. The Talaxian showed a pretty rock. The Silneth sang a soft, chirping song. When it was Taejun's turn, all eyes went to him. He stood up. He reached into a pouch and pulled out a small, smooth stone. It was black with a single red line through it, like blood. He did not speak. He simply held it up. It was a Kfor hunting stone used to test the wind. The room was dead silent. He put it away and sat back down. No one asked Jiho for her sharing. As the activity ended, the younglings started to move to the meal area. Jiho stayed on her mat. Taejun also did not move. For a long time, they sat apart in the quiet room. The adult observer, a nervous Flosian, watched from a screen outside. Then, Taejun moved. He stood up with that smooth, quiet motion. He did not look at Ji-ho. He simply walked across the room and sat down on the mat beside her. Not too close, but beside her. He went back to looking out the dome at the stars. The observer's heart beat fast. This was it. The predator was closing in on the Deathworlder. He alerted Director Lunar. Inside the pod, Ji-ho looked at the boy beside her. She saw the sharp line of his jaw, the pointed tips of his ears. She saw the way his hands rested on his knees, completely still. He did not look at her. He did not growl. He just sat. Slowly, Ji-ho looked down at the rice cake in her hand. It was the last piece of her home. A simple, plain thing. She broke it in two. The sound was small in the quiet room. She held out one half, offering it to Taejun. Taejun's golden eyes finally moved from the stars. He looked at the offered food. For a Kvor, the sharing of food was not a small thing. It was a deep act. To give food was to show trust. To accept it was to accept a bond. It was the first lesson of the clan. He looked at the human girl. Her eyes were not fearful like the others. They were just sad, and very old for a child. He saw no threat in her posture, only a loneliness that mirrored his own. He reached out. His claws were careful. He took the piece of rice cake. He gave a single, slow nod. Then he ate it. Outside, Director Lunar and the observer watched in horror. "He has taken food from her," the observer whispered. "Is this a predatory ritual? Is he claiming his prey?" They did not understand. They saw only actions from their own fears. They did not see the simple truth happening before them. In the silent pod 7, under a blanket of stars, a predator had not found prey. A lonely boy had found the only other person who was not afraid of him. And a lost girl had shared her last piece of home. No words were spoken, but a contract had been made. A new routine began in pod 7. Every morning, Ji-ho would arrive and sit on her mat in the corner. Every morning, Taejun would arrive a little later and sit on the mat beside her. They did not speak. The silence between them was not empty. It was a full, quiet thing. The other younglings gave them space. The fuzzy Talaxian, whose name was Brix, would watch them with wide eyes from across the room. He would whisper to the slender Silneth, "Why does he sit with her? Is he waiting to eat her?" The Silneth would just shiver and look away. To them it was a mystery, a scary mystery. The adult caretakers were also watching. They saw two problems sitting together. The human girl, Ji-ho, was a puzzle. She was quiet. She did her lessons. She drew pictures on her tablet. But she almost never made a sound. The Kvor boy, Taejun, was a shadow. He moved without noise. He completed tasks with sharp, quick motions. He watched everything. Sumin, the human xenopsychologist, was assigned to watch them. She sat in the observation room, her eyes on the screen. She was supposed to understand. She took notes. Day 5. Proximity remains constant. No verbal communication observed. No signs of aggression. On the screen, she saw Ji-ho drawing. The girl was focused. Her small hand moved the stylus with careful lines. Sumin zoomed in. The drawing was of trees. Not the neat, cultivated plants of the station, but wild, thick trees with twisting branches. A forest from Earth. Taejun was not drawing. He was carving. He had a small, hard piece of resin and a safe, blunt tool. He was not making a shape. He was making patterns. Lines and angles that crossed and connected. Sumin did not know it, but he was carving honorglyphs. The simple, ancient symbols of Kvor clans. They told stories of duty, of shelter, of the bond between hunter and hearth. The lunch bell chimed. The other younglings hurried to the dispensers for their nutrient paste. Ji-ho took out her own bag. The station provided human food for her, but she always took a small container from her personal stash. It was the last of her real food from Earth. Today it was a few strips of dried seaweed. She opened the container. She ate one strip slowly. Then, without looking at him, she held the container out towards Taejun. In the observation room, Sumin leaned forward. "The food-sharing ritual continues," she said quietly to herself. Taejun looked at the offered food. He had brought his own meal as well, a dense, dark cake of proteins and grains. He took a piece of his cake. Then, with a movement so deliberate it seemed like a ceremony, he placed it on the mat between them. He then took a strip of seaweed from Jiho's container. They ate. They shared. No words. Sumin wrote quickly. It is reciprocal, not predation. It is an exchange. A trade. After lunch was free time. Brix, the Talaxian, was playing with a floating ball. He was showing off, bouncing it on his head. He bounced it too hard. The ball flew across the room. It hit the wall behind Jiho and Taejun and landed on Jiho's drawing tablet, scattering her styluses. Oops. Brix giggled, but he didn't come to get it. Jiho looked at the mess. She started to pick up her styluses. Taejun watched her. Then he looked at Brix. His golden eyes were calm. He stood up. He walked over to the floating ball. He picked it up. Brix stopped giggling. The room got quiet. Everyone watched the predator. Taejun did not throw the ball back. He simply walked to the disposal chute and dropped the ball in. It vanished with a soft whir. He returned to his mat and sat down. He did not look at Brix again. The message was clear. That toy disturbed the peace. It was gone. Brix looked like he might cry, but he was too afraid. The game was over. Later that afternoon, Jiho was drawing again. She finished her forest picture. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she did something new. She turned her tablet slightly towards Taejun. She pointed to the trees, then to herself. Taejun looked at the drawing. He understood. This is my home. Or, this is where I am from. He looked at his own carving. He had finished a glyph. It showed a mountain under a single star. He turned it and placed it on the mat between them. He pointed to the mountain, then to his own chest. This is my home. Jiho looked at the carving. She reached out one finger very slowly and traced the line of the mountain. Taejun watched her hand, but he did not move. He allowed the touch. Sumin in the observation room felt her breath catch. This was not just coexistence. This was communication. A bridge was being built in the quietest way possible. The day ended. As the younglings lined up to leave, Jiho gathered her things. She looked at the carved resin glyph on the mat. She looked at Taejun, a question in her eyes. Taejun gave a single, small nod. He pushed the carving towards her with one claw. It was a gift. Jiho picked it up. It was warm from his hand. She held it carefully. She reached into her bag and took out her last stylus, a blue one. It was nothing special, just a tool. But it was hers. She held it out to him. Taejun took the stylus. He held it the way a warrior holds a valued tool. He nodded again. They left the pod separately, as always, but they left carrying a piece of the other's world. That night, Sumin wrote her report. They have established a protocol, she typed. It is built on silent observation, reciprocal sharing, and now symbolic exchange. The human offers Earth. The Kvor offers Kvor. They are not integrating with the pod. They are building their own pod, a world of two. The fear is absent. In its place is diplomacy. She leaned back, thinking. The galaxy saw a predator and a deathworlder. But she was starting to see two ambassadors, stranded together, learning the first words of a brand new language. And the first word of that language was not fear. It was "This is mine and I give it to you." The quiet world of Pod 7 could not last. It was an island, and the sea around it was full of noise. The news about the predator cub and the Death World girl had spread through the station staff. Whispers turned into stories. The stories grew. A junior botanist told a cleaner that the human child ate raw meat. The cleaner told a nurse that the Kvor boy had sharpened his claws on the furniture. None of it was true, but truth did not matter as much as feeling. The feeling was one of unease. Two dangerous things were in the gentle nursery of harmony. Brix, the Talaxian youngling, felt this unease more than anyone. His people were strong, sturdy herdfolk. They were not used to being afraid. But since Taejun arrived, Brix felt a low, constant fear in his stomach. He didn't like it. Today he decided to be brave. He decided to remind everyone, especially the small, quiet human who was really strong here. The activity was art with colored sands. Jiho was working carefully, making a pattern of blue and green like an earth ocean. Her things were laid neatly beside her. Her container of special sand, her smooth flattening tool, and the small black stone with the red line that Taejun had first shown. It sat beside her mat like a guardian. Taejun was across the room, getting a drink of water from the dispenser. Brick saw his chance. He puffed out his furry chest. He walked over to Jiho's mat. He didn't say anything. He just reached down and grabbed her container of blue sand. Jiho looked up, surprised. Her hand went out not to grab, but to stop. "Mine," she said quietly. It was one of the few words anyone had heard her speak. Bricks ignored her. "This is better sand," he said loudly, for the others to hear. "You don't need it." He turned to walk away. Then he pretended to trip. His foot, big and clumsy, came down right on Jiho's sand painting, smearing the careful ocean into a muddy mess. The flattening tool skittered away. Bricks stumbled again, his elbow knocking the black Kfor stone off the mat, clattered on the floor. A gasp went through the pod. Everyone froze. The two Silneth clutched each other. They all looked from the ruined painting to Jiho's face. Her eyes were wide. She looked at the messy sand, then at her stone on the floor. Her face, usually so still, showed a flash of deep hurt. It was the last piece of quiet beauty she had made. Destroyed. Bricks laughed. A nervous sound. "Oops. Sorry, Deathworlder." He still held her blue sand. From across the room, a change in the air happened. It was not a sound. It was a silence within the silence. Taejun had turned from the water dispenser. He did not run. He did not shout. He simply began to walk towards Bricks. His movement was not the slow walk from before. It was a fluid, direct stride. His golden eyes were fixed on the Talaxian. His face was calm, but his pupils had narrowed into dark, vertical slits. Bricks saw him coming. The laugh died in his throat. He dropped the sand container. "I was just playing," he said, his voice rising. Taejun did not stop. He walked until he stood between Bricks and Jiho. He was slightly smaller than the Talaxian, but he seemed to fill the space. He did not look at Jiho or her ruined work. His entire focus was on Bricks. Then, Taejun did what his people did before a real fight. He did not bare all his teeth. He simply pulled back his lips to show the sharp, pointed canines. It was a clear, terrible warning. At the same time, a low sound came from his chest. It was so deep that the other younglings felt it more than heard it, a primal vibration that spoke of teeth and claws and no more warnings. For Bricks, whose species had evolved with predators long ago, this was a language his bones understood. His bravery vanished. His herd instinct screamed alone, prey alone. A sharp, sour smell filled the air around him. He had never been so scared in his life. He made a small, terrified whimper, turned, and fled from the pod, his feet slapping against the floor. The action had taken less than 10 seconds. Taejun watched him go. The low sound stopped. He closed his mouth. He turned his back on the room. He looked down at Jiho's mat. He saw the ruined sand, the spilled blue, the stone on the floor. Slowly he bent down. He picked up the black Kfor stone. He used the edge of his tunic to wipe it clean. He placed it back carefully on the corner of Jiho's mat. Then he looked at her. Jiho was looking up at him. There were no tears in her eyes, just that old, deep look. She saw the boy who had sat beside her for days. She saw the protector who had stepped between her and a bully. She saw the fear he caused in others. And in that moment she chose. The adult caretaker, a flustered Flosien, finally rushed into the pod. What happened? By the stars, what happened? Bricks says he was attacked. Before the caretaker could reach Taejun, Jiho moved. She stood up. She was small, but she stepped forward and placed herself slightly in front of Taejun. She did not touch him. She just stood there, a solid, silent wall. She looked at the panicked caretaker. Her voice, when it came, was clear and firm in the quiet room. No, it was a complete sentence. It was a defense. It was a truth. Chaos erupted. Alarms seemed to sound in the minds of the staff. The incident was reported, magnified, sent up the chain of command. The Predator threatened a youngling. The Deathworlder defended him. The story was already spreading across the galactic network of the station. HFY juvenile displays aggression. Deathworlder complicit. The fragile peace was shattered. Orders came down. Taejun was to be taken to a separate holding room immediately. He was to be isolated pending an investigation. As a stern security officer, a Grummel with a hard shell came to take him. Taejun went quietly. He was HFY. He understood orders. But as he passed Jiho, he paused. He looked at her, the girl who had said no for him. Jiho looked back. Then she did the simplest, most powerful thing. She reached out and took his hand. Her small, strong human fingers wrapped around his. It was not a grip of fear. It was a hold. Promise. The security officer gently, but firmly, pulled Taejun away. The contact broke. Taejun was led out. Jiho stood alone in the middle of the pod, surrounded by spilled sand and fearful eyes. The silent world of two was over. Now, the whole galaxy was watching, and it had already decided what it saw. The inquiry room on Harmony was not built for conflict. Its walls were a soft blue, and the light was gentle. But today, the air was sharp and cold. It was a room full of fear wearing polite faces. Taejun sat on one side, perfectly still. A female HFY stood behind him. She was Elder Kamara. She was tall, her posture like carved stone. Her eyes, the same gold as Taejun's, scanned the room. She looked angry, but it was a cold anger. She had come expecting her clan's young one to have brought shame. She was ready to take him away. On the other side of a wide table sat Director Lunar, looking worried. Beside him was Sumin, the human psychologist. Her hands were clasped tightly on the table. Jun, the station's security chief, stood near the wall. He was a solid, quiet man. He had seen real conflict. This room felt stranger to him than a battlefield. The screen on the wall showed Brix's parents. They were on a distant ship. The Talaxian father's fur was puffed up. "He terrorized our child," he said, his voice crackling through the speaker. That creature growled at him. "Our son is traumatized." Elder Kamara's voice cut in, smooth and hard like ice. "A HFY does not terrorize. He acts with purpose. If he showed his teeth, it was a formal warning. Your child provoked it. Where is the dishonor in answering a threat?" "Provoked," Brix's mother cried. "He was playing. The human girl is clearly unstable, a bad influence from a Deathworld. She probably provoked the whole thing." Director Lunar raised his long hands. "Please, we are here for facts. We have visual records from the pod." The lights dimmed. The screen showed the recording from Pod 7. Everyone watched Brix take the sand, ruin the painting, knock over the stone. They watched Jiho's face. They saw the hurt. They saw Taejun walk over. They saw the silent standoff, the bared teeth, the low growl no microphone could catch, but the other youngling's reactions made clear. They saw Brix flee. Then they saw Jiho stand up. They saw her say, no, they saw her take Taejun's hand. The recording ended. "You see," said Brix's father. "A clear, unprovoked, aggressive display." "You see," said Elder Kamara at the same time. "A clear defense of territory and clan brother. The human shared food. She is under his protection. This is our law." The room erupted into argument. Protection. Territory. This is a nursery, not a hunting ground. Sumin's voice, quiet but firm, broke through. "May I speak?" All eyes turned to her. She took a deep breath. "You are all talking about instincts. Predator instincts. Herd instincts. Deathworld instincts." She tapped her tablet. The main screen changed. It showed two images side by side. One was Jiho's drawing of the Earth Forest. The other was Taejun's carving of the mountain glyph. "This is what they were doing before the incident," Sumin said. "For days, this has been their communication. Not threats. Not violence. They were sharing homes. They were trading stories. She brought up more images. A log of the shared food, the seaweed for the protein cake, the rice cake on the first day. This is not predation. Predators do not trade meals. They do not give gifts. She pointed to the final image. The blue stylus Jiho gave, the carved stone Taejun gave. They were building a bridge. What Bricks did was not playing. He broke the bridge. He destroyed her work. He disrespected a sacred gift. She looked at Elder Kamara. Is that not a provocation in Kfor culture? Elder Kamara was silent for a long moment. She looked at the images of the gifts. The stone is a hunter's stone, she said, her voice quieter now. To give it is significant. To disrespect it is a deep insult. She looked at Taejun. He met her gaze and gave one sharp nod. Jun, the security chief, shifted his weight. Everyone looked at him. I am not a diplomat, he said, his voice rough. I see actions. I see a soldier's logic. He pointed to the screen, freezing it on Taejun standing between Bricks and Jiho. He didn't attack. He moved to a position. He placed his body between a threat and his ally. He gave a clear warning shot. The enemy retreated. Mission accomplished. No further engagement. He shrugged. That's not a predator losing control. That's a guard doing his job. A scary job, done in a scary way, but the intent was containment, not harm. The room was silent, processing his blunt words. And the human girl? Director Lunar asked. June almost smiled. The guard did his job. Then the ally reinforced the position. She stood with him. She said no to anyone who would take him away. That's what allies do. Bricks's father sputtered on the screen. This is madness. You are justifying a violent act. Elder Kamara turned her golden eyes to the screen. You are judging a Kfor by the standards of a Talaxian meadow. You are judging a human by the standards of a safe galaxy. You see a monster and a beast. She paused, and for the first time, her stone-like face showed a flicker of something else, curiosity. But the recordings show a gardener and a craftsman. The soldier here sees a guard and an ally. My young clan brother sees a bond sister. She looked back at Director Lunar. You wanted to understand if they are dangerous together. I see now that you asked the wrong question. The question is not if they are dangerous. It is what they consider worth protecting. And it seems they have chosen each other. She placed a clawed hand on Taejun's shoulder. I withdraw my request to remove him for punishment. There is no dishonor here. Only a promise kept. The meeting ended not with an agreement, but with a deep confusion. The facts were the same, but no one could agree on the story. The galaxy, watching the official summary, was divided. Predator or protector, monster or ally. Director Lunar, more lost than ever, turned to Sumin and June after the others had left. What do we do now? We cannot have panic in the nursery. Sumin looked at the image of the forest and the mountain. We stop treating them like problems to be separated, she said. Elder Kamara is right. We ask a new question. June crossed his arms. And what's that? We ask if they can build something, Sumin said slowly. Not just for themselves. For all of us to see. Something that isn't about fear at all. An idea, fragile and new, began to form in the troubled air. The proposal from Elder Kamara was a shock. It was not a punishment. It was a test. A Kfor test of patience and care. Director Lunar agreed, desperate for a solution that was not simply locking one of them away. So, a small, unused hydroponic garden module was assigned to Jiho and Taejun. It was a clear dome, smaller than Pod 7, filled with empty plant beds and quiet hum of systems. The instructions were simple. Cultivate something. Together. To the watching galaxy, it seemed like a strange game. Predator and a Deathworlder, playing with dirt. But to Elder Kamara, it was serious. Could a hunter nurture life? Could a creature from a world of chaos create order? The answers would tell her more about the boy and the girl beside him than any inquiry. On the first day, they stood in the garden module, doors sealed behind them. The air smelled of damp soil and nutrients. Jiho walked to a control panel showing images of approved plants. She scrolled slowly. She stopped at a picture of a simple orange root vegetable. Carrot. She pointed to it, then to herself. From my home. Taejun studied the image. He gave a nod. He went to a different panel, the one for environmental controls. He began making adjustments with quick, precise taps. He was not guessing. He was calculating. He set the light spectrum to match the early sun of a temperate world. He set the water cycle to a slow, deep rhythm. Jiho took a small packet of earth seeds from the dispenser. She knelt by a planting bed. With her fingers, she dug small, neat holes in the soft growing medium. Her movements were careful, gentle. She placed a single seed in each hole and covered it with a soft pat. Taejun watched her work. He saw her method. He then went to a storage locker and found thin, flexible support rods and a spool of clear tie tape. He did not plant. He began to build a structure above the planted bed, a framework of perfect geometric shapes. It looked like a tiny, simple temple. It was not for the carrots. It was for what would come later. Days turned into a quiet week. The routine was the same. They would meet in the garden after their other lessons. They did not speak. They worked. Jiho tended the carrots. She checked the moisture of the soil with her fingertips. She watched for the first green shoots. When they appeared, two small leaves like hopeful hands, she touched one gently. A tiny smile, the first anyone had seen, touched her lips. She looked at Taejun and pointed. Taejun came over. He looked at the sprout. He studied it as if it were a tactical map. He gave a satisfied nod. Then he went to the dispenser. He input a long code. A small capsule was delivered. Inside were not seeds, but a fine, sparkling dust. Kvor crystal moss. It did not grow in soil. It grew on stone, feeding on light and mineral mist. He went to a flat, rocky tray in another bed. He sprinkled the glittering dust. Then he adjusted the controls again. A fine, almost invisible spray filled the air above the tray. The lights above it shifted to a cooler, blue-white glow. Sumin observed from her screen. She made notes. The division of labor is natural, unforced. Jiho works with the soil, with life from the ground. Taejun works with structure, with light, with the air. They are not just growing plants. They are building a tiny, shared world. The garden became their true pod. In here, there were no frightened stares, no whispers. There was only the quiet hum of pumps, the smell of green things, and the shared focus of work. One day, Jiho noticed a problem. The leaves of the carrots were looking pale. She frowned. She checked the water. She checked the light settings on the main panel. They were right. She looked at Taejun, her worry clear. Taejun came to see. He looked at the leaves. He looked at the lights. He looked at his own crystal moss, which was thriving, spreading a delicate, shiny green carpet on the stone. He thought. He went to the control panel and called up a complex readout. His eyes moved fast over the data. He saw it. The nutrient mix in the carrot bed was wrong. It was set for a generic leafy plant, not for a root vegetable from Earth. The station system had no detailed file for a carrot. He began to change the numbers, adjusting the balance of minerals with sharp, confident taps. Jiho watched him. She did not understand the numbers, but she understood his focus. She trusted it. She went to get water, trusting he would fix what she could not. He did. Within 2 days, the carrot leaves were a deep, healthy green. In return, Jiho saw that the spray for the crystal moss was making the floor near Taejun's tray slippery. Without being asked, she took clean absorbent cloths from a supply bin and laid them neatly around the base. A simple act. A safe path for the hunter. They were not just growing plants. They were learning each other's needs. A month passed. The carrots were strong, their green tops bushy. The crystal moss was a beautiful patch of living jewel. Taejun's structure stood above the carrots, ready to support them when they grew taller. Director Lunar and Elder Kamara came for an inspection. They stood in the doorway of the garden module. They saw the vibrant, healthy plants. They saw the neat beds, the clever structure, the clean floors. They saw Jiho carefully thinning out the smaller carrot plants so the others could grow stronger. They saw Taejun using a delicate tool to guide a strand of moss onto a new part of the stone. They saw the two children, sitting on the floor between the beds, sharing a meal. Jiho had a piece of station-made bread. Taejun had a nutrient bar. They broke them in half and traded, as they always did. There was no fear in the room. There was only peace, and growth, and quiet partnership. Elder Kamara did not speak for a long time. Finally, she said softly to Director Lunar, "You see? The hunter can nurture. The Deathworlder can create order. They have not made a weapon. They have made a garden." The director slowly nodded, the weight of his old fear beginning to lift. The silent report from the garden was more powerful than any angry words from an inquiry. The story was changing one green leaf at a time. The galaxy, peeking in, did not see a monster or a beast. It saw two gardeners. The station harmony hummed with the quiet sounds of night. The soft lights were dim. Most younglings were asleep. In their separate rooms, Jiho and Taejun were also asleep. The garden module was dark and still, the carrots standing straight, the crystal moss glowing faintly under the Keep Alive lights. Then the universe reminded them it was not gentle. It was not an attack. It was an accident. A tiny cloud of space dust, moving faster than any ship, struck the station's outer hull. They were microscopic particles, but they were countless. Like sandblasting, they wore away a critical sensor array on the station's farthest wing. The sensor failed. That failure sent a wrong signal to the station's maneuvering thrusters. The thrusters fired for a half-second to correct a problem that did not exist. The sudden, tiny jerk stressed an old weld in a coolant pipe in the non-critical engineering section near the orphanage wing. The weld, weakened by time, cracked. Supercooled fluid hissed into the hallway. It froze the air. It made the metal of the wall as brittle as glass. Then, the normal air pressure inside the station did the rest. With a sound like a terrible sigh, a section of the hallway wall gave way. The hull breach was small, but it was a mouth into the vacuum. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. Emergency doors slammed shut in other sections, sealing the breach. But in the orphanage wing, the damage was done. The main power conduit, which ran right behind that wall, was severed. Every light went out. The gentle hum of air processors stopped. The only sounds were the dying shriek of the alarm and then a terrifying silence, broken by the first cries of fear. In her room, Jiho woke up. It was a blackness so complete it pressed on her eyes. The air already felt still and thick. She heard shouts and panic in the hallway. She slipped out of bed. Her heart beat fast, but her mind was clear. Earth had not taught her to freeze. In his room, Taejun woke. The dark was nothing to him. His eyes adjusted. He could see shapes in the faintest light from the emergency strips near the floor. He could hear everything. The scuffling of feet, the rapid breaths of fear, the thump of a small body falling. He smelled the sharp scent of ozone and cold metal. He was on his feet in a second, not panicked but assessing. The adult caretakers were trying. They had glow lamps, but they were overwhelmed. Their voices, usually so calm, were high with fear. "Stay in your rooms. Please, stay calm." But the calm was gone. A Grummel child was crying, a loud, rocky sound. Two Silneth were huddled together, shaking. Then, a beam that supported a decorative arch, stressed by the sudden pressure change, broke free from a wall. It fell across the main hallway, blocking the path to the closest emergency shelter. It pinned the leg of a young Flosian caretaker. She cried out in pain. The other adults froze, staring at the blockage. From down the dark hall, two shapes approached. They did not run. They moved with purpose. Taejun came first. He could see the clear path through the tangled furniture and scattered toys. He could see the open door of the shelter, past the fallen beam. He looked back. Jiho was right behind him, her hand against the wall to guide herself. They saw the trapped caretaker. They saw the fallen beam. They saw the group of 6 younglings, including Brix, who was whimpering, clutching a smaller Grummel. Without a word, they split up. Taejun went to the younglings. He moved into the middle of them. He did not touch them. He just stood there, a solid presence in the dark. He looked at Brix. Brix's eyes were wide with terror, but he saw Taejun's calm, focused face. It was not the face of the predator who had growled. It was the face of the gardener who fixed the lights. Taejun pointed a claw towards the shelter door, then made a low, clicking sound in his throat. A sound of guidance, not threat. He began to walk that way, slow and sure. The younglings, driven by an instinct deeper than fear, the instinct to follow certainty, stumbled after him. Jiho went to the beam. The Flosian caretaker was pushing at it, but it was too heavy. It was a thick piece of synthetic wood and metal. "Leave me," the caretaker gasped. "Get the children out." Jiho did not listen. She set her feet. She bent her knees. Earth's gravity, heavier than the station's, had built her a strong frame. Her bones were dense. Her muscles were made for work. She was a Deathworlder. She slid her fingers under the beam, finding a grip. She took a deep breath of the thinning air. And she lifted. It was not easy. Her face tightened with strain. A sound, not a cry but a grunt of effort, escaped her lips. The beam rose just an inch, then two. It was enough. The Flosian caretaker scrambled her leg free. "Go," Jiho said, the word tight with effort. The caretaker crawled clear and then turned to help. Together, they shifted the beam just enough to create a path. Jiho dropped it with a heavy thud, breathing hard. She looked up. Taejun had the younglings at the shelter door. He was ushering them in. Brix went last, giving Taejun one last, confused look before disappearing inside. The Flosian caretaker rushed to the shelter. Jiho turned to follow. Then she heard it. A small, scared chirp. One of the Silneth had been separated, hiding under a table in the panic. Taejun heard it too. He was at the shelter door. He looked back at Jiho, then at the hiding spot. He took a step back into the dark hall. Jiho was already moving. "Go," she called to him, pointing to the shelter. She ran towards the chirp, her eyes seeing only shadows. Taejun did not go. He held the heavy shelter door open with his body, a living doorstop, his eyes watching Jiho's back as she vanished into the darkness. He would not seal it until she was safe. Jiho found the small Silneth, too scared to move. She did not speak. She simply reached under the table, gathered the trembling child into her arms, and turned to run back. Her lungs burned. The air was getting bad. She saw Taejun framed in the light of the shelter doorway, holding it for her. She sprinted the last steps. He reached out as she passed, pulling her and the Silneth in. Then he followed, and the heavy door sealed shut with a deep, final thud. Inside, the air was good. The lights were soft. 6 younglings and 2 caretakers were safe. Jiho sat on the floor, gasping. Taejun stood by the door, listening to the station's distant groans. He looked at her and gave a single nod. In the main control room, rescue teams had finally routed power and saw the security drone footage from the dark hallway. They watched the silent, perfect teamwork. The guide and the shield, the predator and the Deathworlder. They watched and they understood. In the dark, when all the gentle lights of civilization had gone out, the 2 most feared children on the station had not been problems. They had been the solution. The rescue was quick once power was restored. The air came back. The lights flickered on. Medics checked the younglings in the shelter. Everyone was safe. The Flosian caretaker's leg was bruised, not broken. She could not stop looking at Jiho and Taejun, her eyes wide with a new kind of wonder. The story did not wait. The security drone footage was not classified. It was a matter of public record. In a galaxy connected by instant networks, the video spread. It was not the edited, dramatic story from before. It was raw. It showed the complete darkness, the panic, the fallen beam. It showed the 2 shapes moving calmly through the chaos. It showed Taejun, a guide in the shadows, leading the scared younglings with quiet certainty. It showed Jiho, her small body straining, lifting what adults could not, her face set in determined effort. It showed their wordless coordination, their trust, And finally, Taejun holding the door, a silent sentinel, until Ji-ho returned. The galaxy watched, and this time it did not see a predator or a monster. It saw a protector. It saw a guardian. The official debriefing was held in the same soft room as the inquiry. But the feeling was different. Director Lunar was there, but he was quiet. Elder Kamara stood tall, but her expression was unreadable. Brix's parents were on the screen, but they were silent. Sumin and June stood to the side. On the main screen, the final clip played. Taejun closing the shelter door, the seal locking into place. Elder Kamara spoke first. Her voice filled the room, not with cold anger, but with a heavy, clear truth. You feared the Kfor for our fangs, she said, looking at the director, then at the screen where Brix's parents waited. You saw a predator. You feared the human for her strength. You saw a monster from a Deathworld. You defined them by what you thought they could destroy. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. But in the dark, when your lights failed, it was the predator who became a guide. It was the monster who became a shield. She turned to look directly at Ji-ho and Taejun, who sat together, as always. They did not use their gifts for harm. They used them to shepherd, to lift, to protect. They have shown an honor my people understand. They have redefined yours. No one argued. The evidence was beyond words. The director slowly nodded. The anger had leaked out of the room, replaced by a kind of humbled awe. The meeting ended not with a ruling, but with a silent agreement. The experiment was over. There was nothing left to prove. Later, in the garden module, the world was quiet. The carrot tops were bright green and full. The crystal moss sparkled under the growth lights. The damage to the station was being repaired, but in here nothing was broken. Ji-ho and Taejun sat on the floor between their plants. A small monitor on the wall was muted, but it showed galactic news channels. Their pictures were on every one. The words scrolling below were new, unexpected heroes. The protectors of harmony. A new definition of strength. They did not look at the screen. They looked at their garden. Ji-ho reached out and touched a carrot top. It was firm and healthy. She looked at Taejun and pointed to the carrot, then made a pulling motion with her hands. Is it ready? Taejun leaned close. He studied the base of the stem where it met the soil. He gave a short, definite nod. Yes. Ji-ho wrapped her fingers around the green leaves. She pulled gently. The soil gave way. From the earth came a perfect carrot. It was long and straight, a vibrant orange. A little piece of earth grown under an alien sun. She held it. She took a clean tool from the shelf and carefully cut the carrot in two, from the green tip down to the orange point. She held out one half to Taejun. He accepted it. He looked at the orange root, then at his own thriving bed of crystal moss. He reached over and, with a delicate claw, broke off a small, perfect piece of the glittering green plant. He offered it to her. They exchanged their harvest, the carrot for the moss. Then, in the quiet of their garden, with the galaxy watching but finally seeing, they ate. It was simple. It was basic. It was a shared meal like so many before. But it was also a celebration. A silent toast to the world they had built together, not from fear, but from patience and care. Outside the dome, the galaxy was talking, arguing, learning. It was a slow process. Old fears die hard. But the image was now seared into a million minds. Not a snarl, but a quiet nod. Not a roar, but a helping hand. Two children, sitting side by side, redefining family under a foreign sun. They finished their food. Taejun looked at the monitor for a moment, seeing the chatter and the news. He made a soft sound, a dismissive puff of air. It was noise. It was not their garden. Ji-ho understood. She picked up a small watering can and began to tend to the remaining carrots. Taejun adjusted the light over the moss. The work continued. The friendship continued. Quiet, simple, and unbreakable. The galaxy had learned fear, and then, slowly, it was learning something else. It was learning to look again.